focus was to be on her education. Being a naval family gave Shiza access to good schools for free, but her mother insisted she needed better schools. Therefore, a large portion of the family income was allocated to education. By the age of 14, Shiza recognized the greater need in her community and started volunteering at a women's prison in Pakistan, and a couple years later in northern Pakistan, following the devastating earthquake in 2005. Shiza's parents, like NCJW, recognized the value of education and the systemic impact it can have on our community. Investing in Shiza's future at a young age resulted in a lifetime of service and advocacy on behalf of those women and children less fortunate. Shiza spends summers empowering young girls to be entrepreneurs and effective activists, amplifying their voices so that they too can make a difference in their community. Shiza's story is affirmation that the work we do at NCJW is making a difference in our community. Programs like our longstanding ECE program, HIPPY, and our new West Dallas initiative will set these children on a different path, and hopefully they too will one day pay it forward. Shiza says it best: getting involved in a cause that you care about is one of the most intimate forms of work that you'll do. I am proud to introduce Shiza Shahid as our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Courtney, for that generous introduction. I am so honored to be here at the 105th anniversary of the NCJW. Congratulations to the Dallas Women's Foundation for the incredible work that you do. And thank you to the incredible team and volunteers of NCJW who have made this beautiful and inspirational event possible. And thank you, most of all, to all the men and women in the room today. Each of you are here today because you believe that all children, regardless of the circumstances that they are born into, should have the opportunity to pursue their dreams. And that is, of course, the spirit of the Jewish tradition of Tikkun Olam, our call to heal the world. If you see what needs to be repaired and how to repair it, then you have found your piece that was intended for you to repair. I am myself not just an advocate for education, but as Courtney described, a product of education. And I would not be here today if my parents hadn't worked hard to give me an education. And also if I hadn't gotten scholarships from philanthropists in Pakistan and in America that had enabled me to attend the best schools in the world. But my path to becoming an entrepreneur in education was not straightforward. And I want to share with you today my story, where I come from, how I ended up against all odds getting a transformative education, and then launching a movement to help drive education access for girls around the world. My story begins in an unlikely place, and it begins with the story of my parents. That's a photograph of the two of them. Let me tell you a little bit about them. My father was born in a village in Pakistan. He grew up poor, lost his own father when he was 9 years old, eventually left the village, worked hard in the city to build a life for himself and his children. My mother was born in a neighboring city. She was the oldest of 4 sisters, and she was born into a very traditional, conservative family. She knew at a young age that she would have to get married as soon as she graduated from high school. She met my father on their wedding day when she was 19 years old, looked around and asked which one he was, but fortunately they ended up being a really great couple, supporting and empowering each other, and they made the radical decision that no matter the cost, their children would have access to a better education and hence to a better life. But I knew that things outside my own bubble were not as rosy in Pakistan. Pakistan has the second highest number of children out of school in the entire world. This year it was ranked the second worst place to be born a woman. And at the time that I was growing up, things were getting worse and worse. There was rising terrorism, violence, It was the post 9/11 world, and there was declining geopolitical security. There was terrorist attacks near my house, and I wanted to understand what was happening to my society. So I began volunteering anywhere I could get my foot in the door. When I was 13, I volunteered in women's prisons. I volunteered to help set up medical camps because there were no female doctors to provide medical assistance to the female inmates. But what surprised me most about volunteering in those prisons was that there were little children who had been born to their mothers inside and had never left because there was essentially no one outside for them. It was there in those conversations with those mothers and their children that I came to understand for the first time what it means to be discarded before you're even born, to never really be given a chance at a better life, or to be born guilty. When I was 14, I began working on microfinance and microenterprise. I was immediately struck by the power of women to lift themselves out of poverty if given the opportunity to be entrepreneurial. I remember one woman in particular whom we gave a small loan to. She used the loan to start a corner shop, to send her daughters to school, to lift her family out of debt. She didn't just empower her own possibilities, but those of her family and her entire community. This was a pattern that I saw over and over again. When you empowered women to earn $1, they invested 80 to 90% back into their community. It was typically 30 to 40% for men. So if there was a silver bullet in international development, it was economically empowering women. But there were also significant challenges to empowering women in the public space. In a society where control of the female body was enforced with a vengeance, where men believed that their honor, or their izzat, lived in a woman's body and must be zealously guarded, and if violated by something as simple as a male gaze, must be avenged through violence. I remember when I was 16, there was a major earthquake in Pakistan. Almost 70,000 people died. And I worked in a relief camp with very traditional attitudes towards women's rights. It was there that I came face to face with this cultural barrier. I remember spending the days chatting away with young teenage girls, all victims of the earthquake. We would sit inside their tents, their makeshift homes, since their houses had been destroyed by the earthquake. I said to them one day that we were sitting inside their tent and talking, "Let's go outside for a walk. It's so claustrophobic in here." And they turned to me and said, "We're not allowed to go for a walk during the day. Our fathers and our brothers don't want us to be seen by the other men." It was in that conversation that I came to understand what it means to be a woman in some of the harshest circumstances in the world, and have your very existence be a source of shame. It was in these parallel worlds with their contradictory ideas, complexities, and nuances that my own understanding of the world was challenged and cut open. How could a woman have so much power that she could hold the economic future of her family and her community in the palms of her hand, yet have such little power that she couldn't go outside for a walk? How could a place be filled with so much tragedy and poverty, yet so much joy and love? How could some people be so cruel in the name of pursuing their religion, yet others be filled with the greatest love and charity in the name of that same religion? What I learned in those situations, in those interactions, I would never have understood had I not set out to understand the world beyond that I was born into. These interactions in my youth were the beginning of a life of constant curiosity, openness, and empathy that I aspire to carry forward in how I interact with my world today. Because the truth is, we all spend our lives in a particular place, in a particular way, and very quickly we take on a particular view of the world. But questioning our biases, our assumptions, our prejudices, and our beliefs has never been more important than it is today, because we live in an America that needs fewer walls and many more bridges. Now, when I was 17, I began applying to colleges. I fully expected to go to a local school, but I decided to try my luck, Naively, not knowing better, I Googled top 10 schools in the United States. I applied to all of them. I couldn't afford to pay, so I asked for a full scholarship. And I was fortunate. I got a full scholarship to Stanford University. As I moved, thank you. As I moved to California, my perspective shifted dramatically. Here I was in the heart of Silicon Valley, surrounded by breakthrough technological innovations. New companies like Twitter, Airbnb, Facebook were changing the way that we lived. I was captivated by the revolution happening around me. I began to wonder, in my work fighting for social justice on the ground, brick by brick, had I been missing more powerful tools? Had I come to Stanford so I could acquire the tools that would allow me to fight for a better world more effectively, more scalably, more innovatively, and more efficiently? But back home, things were getting worse. Terrorism was growing. I felt the social fabric of my society crumbling. There was a suicide attack less than a mile from my home, another one in the hotel where my sister had just gotten married. I became increasingly fearful for my own family. I would go to bed at night with my phone on full volume, fully expecting a call with bad news. But it was in my sophomore year that I stumbled upon a video that shook me to my core. It was a video made by an 11-year-old girl who lived in a town in the north of Pakistan called the Swat Valley, a fairly remote town. This town had been taken over by a terrorist group linked to the Taliban. The group had become increasingly violent, had begun blowing up girls' schools, and in January 2009,